Hi, my name's Maribel, and my sister ripped the dress off my body right there in front of 200 people just to prove I didn't belong. She smiled while I stood there, half exposed, humiliated. Security grabbed my arms. Laughter echoed like gunshots. They thought I came to beg, but I didn't come alone, and when my husband walked in, the whole room stopped breathing. You want to know what happened next? Trust me, so did they. Beat. Before we dive in, tell me, what time are you listening to this and where are you? Leave a comment below. I want to know who's hearing this story, because it's not just mine. It might be yours too. Let's begin. It was one of those quiet evenings when nothing felt wrong, but everything sat just a little too still. The kind of stillness that makes you wonder what's sneaking up on you. I stood in my tiny suburban kitchen, the scent of roasted garlic and rosemary dancing through the air. Grant sat across from me at the small oak table, glasses slipping down his nose as he scrolled through his endless work emails. The overhead light hummed above us, a soft, constant buzz that matched the rhythm of our routine life. "Dinner smells amazing, babe," Grant mumbled without looking up. I smiled, not because of the compliment, but because I knew he'd say that. He always did, whether it was true or not. That's who Grant was. Steady, reassuring, and maddeningly optimistic. Then came the sound. A firm knock at the door, followed by the hollow thud of a package dropping to the porch. "I'll get it," I said, wiping my hands on a dish towel. On the doorstep lay a thick ivory envelope, one of those expensive ones with the embossed gold crest and perfectly looped calligraphy. My stomach twisted the second I saw it. I didn't even have to open it to know who it was from. Rowena. I stepped back inside and slid my finger under the flap. The card inside was elegant, unnecessarily so. The kind of thing people kept in scrapbooks to remind themselves how important they once were. You are cordially invited to the Calder Foundation's annual Winter Gala. Beneath that, my name, Mrs. Maribel Doss. My hand tightened around the card, the corners bending under my grip. Doss, my father's last name. Not Calder, not my married name, not even the name I used on social media. Just Doss. Like I'd never grown, never changed, never become someone of my own. Grant noticed the shift in my face. "Everything okay?" I sat back down slowly. "She used my maiden name on purpose." He frowned. "Maybe it was just a mistake." "No," I said flatly. "Rowena doesn't make mistakes. She sends messages. This one says, 'You're not really one of us.'" He reached across the table and rested his hand on mine. "You don't have to go." "That's the problem," I whispered. "I kind of do." He tilted his head. "Why?" "Because if I don't, she wins." There was silence between us for a beat. Then Grant offered, "You should go. It's family." I stared at the card again. Family isn't always where you feel safest. Later that night, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, trying to pick something, anything, that said, "I belong here," even if my heart didn't believe it. I found a navy blue dress I hadn't worn in years. It hugged a little tighter than I remembered, but it would have to do. As I tried to zip it, the metal snagged halfway up my back. Of course. I exhaled sharply, bent down to the old sewing kit I kept in the bottom drawer, and pulled out a silver safety pin. With a bit of fumbling, I secured the dress. From the hallway, Grant called out, "Everything all right?" "Just doing my usual magic," I called back. "You know me, always fixing things." He peeked in, grinning. "You and your little fixes." I gave a soft, tired laugh. "Just until it all falls apart." I paused, catching my reflection again. The dress looked fine, polished even, but something about the safety pin glinting near my waist felt like a secret I was already carrying, like a weak seam trying to hold together something more fragile than fabric. And then, faintly, as if conjured by the mirror itself, I heard her voice in my mind, Rowena's voice, the kind of memory that seeps in without permission. "You'll never fit in where real class belongs." I closed my eyes, took a breath, then opened them again, straightened my back, pulled my shoulders down. "We'll see about that," I whispered. By the time I grabbed my clutch and slipped on my heels, the sky had already turned ink black. The street outside dotted with porch lights and the occasional flicker of a neighbor's TV through parted curtains. I stepped out, locked the door behind me, and climbed into the car. The invitation sat beside me in the passenger seat like a dare. As I turned onto the main road, the Chicago skyline sparkled in the distance, cold and sharp, like diamonds with edges. I didn't know what waited for me at that gala, but I knew one thing: Rowena had started something, and I wasn't going to let her finish it. The valet door closed behind me, and the sound of laughter from the ballroom was the first warning I ignored. I stepped inside the gilded foyer, where every surface shimmered like someone had dusted the air with diamonds. A velvet rope divided guests from staff, but in places like this, the line was more than physical. You could feel it in how people looked at you, like they were trying to figure out which side you really belonged on. The Doss Foundation Gala had always been Rowena's favorite hunting ground, a space where she could shine and, if she was lucky, outshine everyone else. The chandeliers hung heavy above us, thousands of faceted crystals dripping like frozen tears. I wasn't sure if I was walking into a celebration or an execution. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the visionary behind tonight's success, Rowena Doss." Lydia Poe's voice rang out from the stage like a polished bell. The crowd burst into applause. I stood just inside the threshold, invisible in plain sight. Rowena took the stage in a champagne-colored gown that clung to her like it had been tailored by ambition itself. Her smile was wide, calculated. I'd seen that smile before, at funerals, at weddings, at every family dinner where I was supposed to disappear quietly. She scanned the room. When her eyes landed on me, I saw the flicker, surprise, or maybe disappointment, before she smoothed it over. I walked toward her, keeping my steps measured. The heels pinched, but I didn't flinch. Rowena descended the steps like a woman stepping down from her own pedestal. "Oh," she said, her tone honeyed and thick. "You made it. I didn't think that dress still fit you." A few people near us chuckled, the kind of laughter that comes with practiced cruelty. I smiled, gentle and sharp. "It's not the dress that needs to fit," I said quietly. "It's the company." A hush fell over the group. Not long, just a sliver of silence, but enough for the words to settle like dust in the air, and for Rowena's pupils to narrow just slightly before she turned away. Dinner was announced shortly after. Waiters glided through the crowd with practiced grace, directing guests toward the seating area. I followed, keeping my posture tall, eyes forward. I'd expected to be seated near the family table, not out of entitlement, but out of logic. My name was on the invitation, after all. Instead, I found my card, Mrs. Maribel Doss again. Placed near the far end of the room, 2 chairs from the catering entrance, right next to a fire extinguisher and a column that partially blocked my view of the stage. I stood there for a moment, just long enough for it to sting, but not show. Someone brushed past me, a woman in sequins and strong perfume. She glanced at my table card, then at me. "Oh," she said, squinting. "I thought you were part of the staff. You're serving, right?" I looked her dead in the eyes. "Not tonight." She blinked, uncertain whether to laugh or apologize, then walked away without doing either. I sat down, adjusting the napkin in my lap. It was embroidered in gold thread. Mrs. Doss. Every detail had been curated. Every detail meant to remind me who was in control. Across the ballroom, Rowena lifted a flute of champagne, surrounded by those who always followed her lead. Socially, politically, financially, she glowed in their praise. Lydia Poe returned to the mic. Let's raise a glass to grace, to vision, to the future, and to the woman who made tonight possible, Rowena Doss. Waiters moved quickly, offering champagne to every table. A young server passed behind Rowena, hand trembling ever so slightly, and his tray tilted just enough. A splash of champagne landed near the hem of her gown. Not enough to ruin it, but enough to earn a reaction. Rowena turned, sharp as glass. "Be careful," she snapped, "or you'll end up like her." She didn't have to point. Her eyes did it for her, aimed straight at me. The laughter started slow, like people weren't sure if it was okay. Then it spread, like smoke in a theater. A soft murmur of amusement coated in guilt. I didn't flinch. I didn't speak. I simply picked up my water glass and took a measured sip, the crystal cool against my lip. My fingers brushed the edge of the napkin again. "Mrs. Doss." There was a time I might have cried. A time I might have gotten up and left, or tried to explain myself to a room that didn't care. But not tonight. Tonight, I remembered my mother's voice. Dignity never needs an audience. For years, I believed that, clung to it. But tonight, it felt like a curse, like silence had become my own noose. And still, I said nothing, because I wasn't ready to fight yet. But I would be. And when I did, they'd all remember what it sounds like when the quiet one finally speaks. By the time the speeches began, I could feel her eyes on me, like a warning or a promise. The ballroom had softened under low golden lights. The clinking of forks against dessert plates gave way to murmured small talk. My back ached from sitting so long at that lonely table near the catering door, but I didn't shift. I didn't want to give Rowena even that small satisfaction. I took a sip of flat water from the sweating glass and caught the faint reflection of myself in it. A blur, almost like I wasn't there at all. Maybe I wasn't. Not in the way she wanted me to be. Then Lydia Poe's voice cut through the hum. "All right, everyone, let's gather near the stage. Time for our legacy photo." Chairs pushed back. People stood, smoothing gowns, adjusting tuxedos. I moved slowly, unsure whether to follow. I wasn't invited to the family table. What made me think I'd be welcome in the family photo? But I stood anyway. I wasn't raised to slink away, not even when dignity was in short supply. Near the oversized foundation logo stood the gleaming white backdrop, the logo embossed in gold. Lydia was already directing people into position like she'd choreographed the whole thing hours ago. Probably had. Rowena was front and center, of course. Her hand rested on Arthur Vance's shoulder, like a queen selecting her knight. Lydia, ever the perfect MC, motioned everyone closer. I lingered near the edge of the group, trying to gauge if I was supposed to step in. Before I could make up my mind, Rowena turned her head ever so slightly and called out, loud enough to catch attention, soft enough to sound gracious. "Let's make sure everyone who matters is in the frame." A few eyes turned toward me. Not welcoming, not hostile either. Just uncertain. The kind of look people give when they're trying to remember if they've seen your face before or just imagined it. The photographer, a man with tired eyes and a beard too neat to be honest, glanced toward me and waved lazily. I stepped forward, inching closer. Right as he lifted the camera, Rowena moved. It was nothing, really. Just a graceful pivot of her hip, a shift of her arm, the way a woman might adjust her weight to ease her shoes. But it was perfectly timed. Her shoulder filled the space I was about to enter. The flash went off. The moment snapped. The crowd clapped lightly, more out of habit than joy. I blinked, blinded for a second. Then people were dispersing again, returning to their seats, chatting about the wine, the gowns, the auction. I returned to my lonely seat, the sound of the photographer thanking Rowena still ringing in my ears. A few minutes later, as the room dimmed for the presentation, the slideshow began. Images of the DOS Foundation's work flickered on the giant screen. Smiling children, ribbon cuttings, construction sites, politicians shaking hands with Rowena. Then came the photo from just moments before. There she was, poised like a first lady. Arthur Vance beside her, Lydia, glowing, and a clean, crisp space where I should have been. Cropped. Gone. Erased. I felt the air leave my lungs. My face flushed, not from rage, not yet, but from the sheer audacity of it. I stared at my reflection again, this time in the empty champagne flute. I saw the outline of my face, blurred by the curve of the glass, and something in my chest folded in on itself. It's strange, I thought. How silence sounds in a room full of laughter. It has shape. It presses against you. Beneath the table, my hands clenched in my lap. The safety pin at my side glinted under the chandelier light, a single spark in a pile of ash. And now, Lydia announced with a practiced cheer, let's hear from the woman behind it all, Rowena Doss. Applause again. Applause like thunder in a storm only one of us knew was coming. Rowena stepped onto the stage, took the mic, and smiled like she was born with it in her hand. I remember when this was just a dream, she began. No support, no structure, just me, alone, working late nights, sacrificing comfort, building this from the ground up. Lies, I thought. Or maybe half-truths, the most dangerous kind. She spoke about the early days of the foundation, how she'd risked everything, poured her soul into every corner of it. She spoke about family, how it inspired her, kept her grounded. She spoke about how vision and grit built this empire. She never said my name, not once. She skipped over the years I spent doing unpaid accounting work, nights drafting design proposals while she went to fundraisers, my weekends running charity booths, my voice behind half the mission statements. The room hung on her every word. And when she ended her speech, Rowena raised her glass and looked straight at me. To those who knew their place, she said, smiling. The audience laughed, some politely, some awkwardly. And then they looked at me, just for a beat, like they were checking to see if I would break. I didn't. I sat still. I smoothed the hem of my dress. I straightened my back, and I whispered, just under my breath, not for long. The next morning, I woke up to see her photo everywhere, and my name nowhere. Light poured through the blinds like a slap. It wasn't warm or soft like in the magazines, where women wake up glowing, rested. No, this light was sterile, too white, exposing everything it touched. I sat up slowly, my dress from last night still hanging off the closet door, that silver safety pin catching the sunlight like it had survived a war. My feet hit the floor, cold. My body moved before my brain caught up. In the kitchen, Grant was already up. The smell of burnt toast and overbrewed coffee filled the air. He didn't speak right away, just slid his phone across the counter as I walked in. "They cropped you out," he said softly. No judgment, just a fact. The screen showed a glossy image, Rowena front and center, her perfect wave frozen in time. Our mother on one side, Arthur on the other. Lydia grinning nearby. No trace of me. The headline read, "The Doss Foundation Gala, a family's unbreakable bond." I took the phone, my hand steady even as something inside me shifted. The kind of shift you don't come back from. I scrolled through the comments. Such elegance. True legacy. Beautiful family. Who's the woman near the back? Staff? She must have snuck in. Hilarious if she's the caterer. Look at that dress, el-al. Each word landed like a sting. Not sharp enough to wound, just constant enough to burn. Grant leaned against the counter, watching me like he was waiting for the tears. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, I was, but because I'd run out of ways to process the same injury over and over again. "This isn't humiliation," I finally said, my voice low. "This is deletion." He opened his mouth to speak, maybe to offer comfort, maybe advice. I didn't want either. My phone rang. I didn't need to check the screen. Only one person still called without texting first. "Hi, Mom." Her voice came wrapped in artificial sweetness. "Hi, honey. Are you okay?" "Fine," I said, lying by instinct. She hesitated. "Rowena said you were a little off last night. She said you caused a scene." A scene. I'd barely spoken. "She's worried people might talk. Maybe you should clear the air. Apologize before it gets any bigger." I stood there, phone to my ear, staring at the mug in my hand like it might break. Apologize? For what, exactly? "She's doing her best to keep the family's name clean. You know how these things work. A whisper turns into a headline." I almost laughed, a bitter sound stuck in my throat. "She erased me, Mom, in front of a room full of people." Silence. "She's keeping the family's image together," my mother finally said. "Don't be dramatic." Of course she'd defend the one who looked better in pictures. "I have to go," I said, ending the call without waiting for goodbye. Grant hadn't moved. He looked at me with something close to fury, but not at me, never at me. "She really said that?" he asked. I nodded. Then came the email, just a soft ping, as the notification slid across my screen. I opened it out of habit, not curiosity. It was from Casey Jenkins, a journalist I'd helped 2 years ago when she was just starting out. I'd gotten her access to our donor archives, taught her how to decode Rowena's carefully staged press kits. She'd once called me the quiet backbone of the whole thing. Subject line: quick quote before publication. Body: "Hi Maribel, Rowena reached out. She's doing a feature about the foundation's growth. She says you were just the bookkeeper and that she built the rest solo. I wanted to give you a chance to comment before it goes live tomorrow." I read the message 3 times, each slower than the last. It wasn't just exclusion anymore, it was an official rewrite, public, permanent. "She's rewriting you," Grant said, voice tight. "In real time." I nodded, eyes still fixed on the screen. "You don't have to take this." My gaze drifted to the dress still hanging by the closet, the safety pin still holding the seam together. That pin had made it through 2 decades of emergencies. Weddings, funerals, tax season. Last night, it hadn't broken, not yet. "If she wants war," I whispered, "she's already lost her peace." Grant didn't ask what I meant. He didn't need to. I walked to the living room, opened my laptop, and sat down with the calm of someone who'd already made up her mind. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. That's not how women like me fight. I clicked open a new document. The cursor blinked, patient, ready. I cracked my knuckles, exhaled, and started typing. Not a tantrum. A timeline, not revenge. A record. She wanted to erase me. She should have used a better pen. The next evening, I walked into the same ballroom. Only this time, I wasn't on the guest list. The heels of my black shoes clicked softly against the polished marble floor, a rhythm more steady than my breath. My dress wasn't new, but it fit like armor, black silk, no sequins, no shimmer. My hair pulled back tight. I wasn't here to impress anyone. I wasn't here to be seen. I was here because I refused to be invisible again. The entrance had changed slightly. Fewer flashing lights, fewer cameras. Tonight wasn't about charity. It was business, quiet, exclusive. The kind of night where handshakes decided contracts and smiles masked power plays. The young woman at the reception desk looked up. Her lips parted, eyes flicked to her tablet. "Name, please?" I didn't move. "I'm not on your list." She blinked, unsure of what to do next. Silas, the security guard from last night, approached. He remembered me. You could tell by the way he hesitated, like a man caught between what he saw and what he was told. "Ma'am," he started, calm but cautious. "This is a private event." A man behind me muttered, not even hiding his smirk. "She's with catering, right?" I didn't look at him. I looked straight at Silas. "No," I said gently. "I own the company that catered last night's event." Silas froze. His brows lifted just slightly. A flicker of doubt crossed his face. Then, respect. He stepped aside. "Welcome, ma'am?" I walked in. The ballroom felt colder than the night before. Or maybe I'd just stopped hoping it would ever feel warm again. Rowena stood near the stage, mid-laugh, surrounded by people whose smiles were wide but never reached their eyes. She wore ivory this time, not red. I wondered if she thought white could hide the blood on her hands. Her gaze brushed over me, just for a second, and that was all I needed. One glance and her face shifted. Not fear. Rowena didn't know how to show fear. But something behind her smile stiffened. She turned away first. I didn't go to her, not yet. I made my way to the silent auction table. On display, a framed mission statement for the Doss Foundation. Signed, of course, only by her. I leaned in, close enough to read every word I'd written 5 years ago. Same phrasing, same formatting. The only thing missing was my name. "All the lies you built on my work," I whispered, "are about to collapse." I could feel it, not just the rage, but the clarity that comes when you stop trying to be liked. I wasn't here for redemption. I was here for the truth. "Thought I'd find you here." I turned. Grant. He wore the same suit from our anniversary dinner last year, clean, dark, confident. He hadn't told me he was coming. "You shouldn't be here," he said gently. "And yet," I replied. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't need to do this tonight." I smiled, but it didn't reach my eyes. "She's been rewriting my story for years," I said. "It's time I write the ending." Grant looked toward the stage, where Rowena now posed beside some out-of-town sponsor, hand on his arm like she belonged in a museum of power. "She's playing on her home field," he warned. "She'll twist it, make it ugly." I turned my head, watching her. "Then I'll make it honest." He didn't try to stop me again. I moved through the room like a shadow, unnoticed by those too busy performing for each other. But a few caught my eye, women my age, older, quiet glances, half nods. They recognized what was happening, even if they didn't know the details. I didn't need their approval. I just needed them to see. At the edge of the room, I stopped. A man tapped the mic, clearing his throat. Some corporate executive. He praised the foundation's expansion, thanked the Doss family for decades of sacrifice. Rowena beamed as if she'd planted every tree in the city by hand. I didn't say a word, not yet. I stood still, thinking about the years I spent behind the scenes, running payroll, writing grant applications, cleaning messes no one saw, drafting every speech she now delivered as if they were born from her own mind. Silence isn't peace. It's slow erasure. And I was done being erased. The next time I saw Rowena, she wasn't laughing. She was screaming my name across the ballroom. I had just stepped toward the back exit, hoping to leave quietly, when her voice cut through the music like glass on tile. "Maribel!" I turned slowly, my face calm though my spine was bracing for impact. Every head in the room pivoted toward us. Rowena stood under the spotlight, one hand gripping the mic, the other clenched so tight her knuckles were pale. She smiled, but it was all teeth. "Don't sneak off just yet," she purred into the mic, voice coated in charm too sweet to be sincere. "Everyone, a warm welcome to my baby sister, Maribel Doss." That name, Doss, stung deeper than usual. I hadn't used it since I took Grant's last name. She knew that. Polite applause fluttered through the room like a breeze that didn't know where to land. A few people looked confused, others amused. Rowena's jaw twitched when the crowd didn't respond quite the way she expected. I stood still, chin high. If I walked away now, she'd say I was ashamed. If I stayed, I was her puppet. So I did neither. I took a breath, then made my way slowly toward the edge of the crowd. I stayed out of the spotlight. She hated that even more. Lydia Poe, ever the eager MC, stepped back to give Rowena center stage again. But Rowena wasn't ready to let go. "Oh, that's Maribel," she said into the mic, laughter lacing her words. "She's always been so hands-on. Couldn't stay away from the catering, could you?" The crowd chuckled, not loudly, but enough. That soft, poisonous laugh that doesn't echo, but it sticks. I felt the heat rush to my face, but I didn't flinch. I looked directly at her and smiled, cool and careful. "Just making sure the help feels appreciated," I said quietly. A few nearby guests stiffened. One woman beside me lowered her eyes. I turned to leave. As I passed her, I felt her fingers close around my wrist. The pressure was firm, possessive, fake smile still plastered across her face. "Don't you dare embarrass me," she hissed under her breath. I didn't pull away. I met her eyes. "You've been embarrassing me for years," I said, my voice steady. "I'm done playing your shadow." That was when everything snapped. I don't know if she planned it. Maybe she did. Or maybe the mask just cracked wide open. She reached out and grabbed the shoulder of my gown, navy blue, the one I'd worn the first night. The same one with the little silver safety pin tucked just beneath the seam. Her fingers curled into the fabric and yanked. The sound of silk tearing echoed louder than the orchestra. It happened so fast I barely registered it. The rip, the gasp from the crowd, the air hitting my skin. The silver pin clinked against the marble floor and spun in place. For a moment, there was silence. Then came the laughter. Nervous at first, then bolder, meaner. I stood there exposed, not just in fabric, but in dignity. Every camera in the room had found its target. 100 flashing lights, none of them blinking. Rowena stood tall, smug, and victorious, like she'd just ripped open a curtain and found nothing behind it. "People like you don't belong here," she said, not even pretending to whisper. Her words crashed into me harder than her hands ever could. No one moved to help. Not Lydia, not the guests. They just watched. And then, finally, a voice. "Ma'am, should I escort her out?" Silas, the security guard. He looked from me to Rowena, waiting for instruction. Rowena didn't say a word. She didn't have to. That silence was permission. I looked around the room once more. These people, once friends, clients, partners, couldn't even look me in the eye. They pretended to be checking their phones, sipping their drinks, fixing their makeup. I reached down slowly, picked up the silver pin, and closed my fingers around it. It hadn't broken, just fallen. With both hands, I pulled my torn dress across my chest, covering what I could, and walked away. Not fast, not in shame. I walked the way a storm walks off the horizon, slow, steady, and promising something behind the clouds. The doors had barely closed behind me when I heard another voice, deep, calm, and furious, say, "What the hell just happened here?" I turned. Grant. He stood just inside the ballroom, framed by the light behind him, his black suit tailored to perfection. His voice didn't need to be raised. It carried like thunder through a room that had forgotten how to breathe. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Forks hovered mid-air. Even the string quartet paused, unsure if they were still part of the background or witnesses to a storm. Rowena froze at the podium. Her smirk vanished like mist. "Grant, I didn't realize—" He cut her off, not by shouting, but with a silence so sharp it made the air feel thinner. "You didn't realize she was married to me?" he said, taking one slow step forward. "Or that you just ripped a woman's dress off in front of 200 people with cell phones?" I watched Rowena flinch. Her lips parted, but nothing came out except a weak laugh, like she could still charm her way out of what had just happened. "It was a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding here," Grant said, his voice steady and cold, "is thinking that your name or your status gives you the right to degrade someone." The room shifted. I could feel it. Guests started glancing at each other, unsure if they should be embarrassed for witnessing it or for not stopping it. Lydia Poe slowly lowered the mic. Even the photographer holding his camera looked like he didn't know whether to click or bow. Grant walked toward me, eyes only on mine. When he reached me, he took off his jacket without a word and draped it around my shoulders. The fabric was warm, heavy, and felt more like armor than comfort. He didn't touch me after that. He didn't need to. Just the act of covering me, literally, symbolically, broke whatever spell Rowena had over the room. Then, without looking at her, he turned to the main sponsor, Arthur Vance. The man had stood silently so far, drink in hand, observing like a judge. "You might want to know something," Grant said, voice quieter now, but somehow stronger. "Every number Rowena's ever shown you, every report, every event budget. My wife wrote them. Maribel ran the books. She made this place solvent while her sister took the credit." Arthur blinked. Rowena opened her mouth again. "That's not true." "She signed every audit," I said calmly. "Check the records. My name is on every quarterly statement filed since the Foundation's first year." The murmurs returned, heavier this time, darker. A man near the back whispered something to his wife. Lydia Poe stepped off the stage and slowly backed away, like she didn't want to be too close when it all fell. Arthur didn't speak, but his expression hardened. You could see the math happening in his mind. Money has memory, and memory had just shifted sides. Rowena's jaw clenched. Her voice dropped to a hiss. "You planned this." "No," I said. "You did. Every time you took something from me, every time you lied and smiled and invited me back just to cut me down. You wrote your ending, not mine." She took a step toward me. Her mask was gone now. No charm, no composure. Just a woman cornered by the truth she'd spent years avoiding. "You're doing this to destroy me." I looked at her, really looked at her, and finally understood something. She'd never expected to lose. Not once. Not because she was smarter, but because she believed people like her couldn't fall. "I'm not destroying you, Rowena," I said. "I'm just stopping the cover-up." There was a long beat of silence. No one interrupted, no one defended her, and that, more than anything, was the shift. Grant placed a hand gently on my back, asking without words if I was ready to leave. I nodded. We turned, walked slowly toward the exit. This time, the crowd didn't look away. They watched, not in judgment, but in recognition. Of me, of what had just happened. By the time I stepped through those doors, I wasn't the invisible sister anymore. And she wasn't untouchable. The next morning, the headlines didn't read about Rowena's charity. They read about her scandal. I sat on the balcony just outside our apartment, the city still coated in the gray hush of early light. My coffee had gone cold, untouched on the small iron table beside me. I watched a delivery truck inch down the street, followed by a jogger with a neon hoodie and a tired dog. Just another morning in Chicago, but not for her. My phone hadn't stopped vibrating since sunrise. The screen was a mess of notifications, texts, missed calls, mentions, news alerts, emails I hadn't subscribed to, but the headline that sat at the top, clear as crystal, was from the Tribune. Socialite accused of publicly humiliating her own sister at charity gala. Beneath it, a photo, frozen mid-frame, of Rowena, hand gripping the torn fabric of my dress, caught mid-laugh like she was the villain in someone else's screenplay. I didn't know how to feel. Lighter, maybe. Not joyful, not vindicated, just still. Grant stepped out from the kitchen, barefoot, tie loose around his neck, holding his phone in one hand and a mug in the other. "They confirmed it," he said. "The audit leaks. Arthur's board ran them overnight. Turns out, everything you signed, she edited. Fudged donation figures, exaggerated program results, rearranged expense categories to make it all look glossier." I nodded slowly. Let the truth do the talking. He handed me my coffee, reheated, freshly poured. I didn't ask. That's the kind of man he is. Then he leaned against the balcony railing and looked out over the skyline like he could see the fallout drifting across the city. My phone buzzed again. This time, a name I hadn't seen since that early email in Chapter 4. Dylan Rojas, local features reporter. I hesitated, then answered. "Maribel," he said quickly, voice tight with guilt. "I owe you a story. The city owes you one. If you're willing, I'd like to run a full feature. No quotes from Rowena. Just you. Just facts." I took a breath. "No, Dylan. The story already told itself. You just have to decide whether you're ready to tell it straight." He didn't argue, just said, "I will." Across town, somewhere behind thick glass and manicured hedges, Rowena stood in her home. The mansion she once bragged about to anyone who'd listen. She was in the hallway outside her dressing room, where everything used to sparkle. Now her reflection in the hallway mirror looked cracked, not literally, but in that cruel, poetic way life sometimes delivers. Her phone rang nonstop. Emails from sponsors, legal advisors, PR handlers. I knew that rhythm, the way disaster hums through silence before it explodes. At some point, she called our mother. "She's ruining me," Rowena sobbed. I wasn't there to hear Evelyn's response, but I imagined it exactly as Grant recounted when she called him. She said, "You ruined yourself the moment you tore your sister's dress on stage." Then she hung up. Even Evelyn, who once measured worth in appearances, saw it for what it was. There was no PR spin that could fix what the world had already decided. On TV, commentators debated it. Not politics, not policy. My dress, her face, the symbolism, the violence, the silence. One clip showed a split screen. Rowena's clawed hand caught in motion, my shoulders bare, eyes steady. "Dignity wins," one anchor said. For once, the quiet one wasn't weak. She was just patient. Online, hashtags trended. "The silent one speaks, saw Maribel not, the help, cha dignity wins." Even Lydia Poe, who once introduced Rowena like a queen, released a statement. "The incident at the DOS Gala does not reflect the values we celebrate. We regret our part in enabling that stage." Rowena's foundation lost 3 major sponsors by noon. By dusk, the website had gone dark. I stayed on the balcony most of the morning. Eventually, Grant sat beside me, shoulder to shoulder, not saying much. He didn't need to. "It feels strange," I murmured. "Winning without shouting." He turned to me, his voice warm and grounded. "That's what grace sounds like." I let the quiet sit between us. No fireworks, no speeches, just the faint hum of traffic below, the sun climbing slow and pale through the buildings. She built her image like a cathedral, grand, hollow, impressive from a distance. But it only took a single moment of truth, one ripped seam, to collapse it all. And I didn't have to raise my voice, just stand still while hers buried her. A week later, I walked into the same ballroom, not for revenge, but for closure. The space looked different, not just in decoration, but in spirit. The chandeliers still hung like crystal constellations above us, but the lighting was warmer now, softer, like someone had finally dimmed the ego and turned up the heart. They'd renamed the annual gala, not the DOS Foundation anymore. Tonight's banners read, "The Calder Initiative for Integrity." I didn't ask for that name. Arthur Vance did. Said it was time to credit the person who built the foundation's bones, not just the one who posed for its pictures. I walked in slowly, heels clicking against marble, familiar and foreign all at once. No spotlight followed me, no camera flash chased me. And I didn't shrink from it. I wasn't hiding this time. I moved through the crowd of new volunteers and longtime donors, offering quiet nods and small smiles. The air wasn't thick with competition anymore. It felt genuine. People shook hands, not just glasses. Laughter didn't sound rehearsed. As I approached the silent auction table, a young intern rushed by and dropped something. A small silver glint that landed with a faint ping near my shoe. I bent down to pick it up. A safety pin, almost identical to the one that held my torn gown together that night. The one that used to humiliate me every time I thought of it. I turned it over in my palm, feeling the cool metal press against my skin. Grant had walked up behind me, unseen until he spoke. "You kept one of those," he said, voice gentle. I nodded, still looking at it. "I did," I replied. But not because of what it held together that night. Because of what it reminded me I never lost. He reached for my hand, and I closed the pin in my fist, the sound of quiet conversations washing around us like calm waves. The evening unfolded without chaos. People mingled, shared stories, wrote checks not for exposure, but out of belief. The kind of night Rowena always wanted, but never truly created. Toward the end, I noticed a hush spreading through the room. Eyes shifted toward the entrance. A figure had arrived, not announced, not escorted, but instantly recognized. Rowena. She stood still for a moment near the doorway. She looked smaller, not physically but spiritually. She wore a long gray coat and no makeup, her hair pulled back into a simple bun. Her usual air of command was gone. She stepped into the room like someone walking through smoke, bracing for burns that didn't come. Some people stared, others whispered. No one approached her. She walked slowly across the floor until she stood in front of me. "I came to apologize," she said, voice thin and steady, but eyes heavy with something older than guilt. Weariness, maybe. Or truth finally sitting too long on her shoulders. I didn't rush my response. I studied her face. Still familiar, still mine in some ways. "I don't hate you, Rowena," I said, quietly. "But I can't rebuild what you broke. I can only build something new." She gave the faintest nod. No tears, no excuses, just understanding. That was enough. She turned and walked out just as quietly as she came, and when she did, the silence she left behind didn't sting. It settled like dust. A little while later, my mother appeared near the side of the room, hesitating before approaching me. She looked older than I remembered, not aged, softened, humbled. She took my hand, uncharacteristically unsure. "I failed both my daughters," she said, her voice uneven. "In different ways." I didn't squeeze her hand, not at first. I let her sit in that sentence for a second. Then I said, "Maybe, but it's not too late to learn from us." She blinked, looked at me, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't see judgment in her eyes. I saw regret, and that, oddly, was its own kind of love. Later, when the last coat had been gathered from the rack and the last dish cleared from the tables, I stepped up to the microphone. I hadn't planned to speak, but when I turned and faced that room, the same room where I'd been ridiculed, exposed, made small, I understood why I had to. "Dignity," I began, voice steady, "isn't about what we wear, or who praises us, or how many people clap. Dignity is what you refuse to give up, even when everything else is taken from you." The applause wasn't thunderous. It didn't need to be. It was warm, honest. I looked out at them, the real ones who stayed, and whispered under my breath, just for me. I finally belong, not because they say I do, but because I know I do. I stepped down, walking past the donation jar near the exit. I opened my hand, revealing the old safety pin still resting in my palm. Then, without ceremony, I dropped it into the jar. And as the music played, I let the safety pin fall into the donation jar, leaving the past right where it belonged.